This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 101 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about destinations worth visiting twice, or at least twice, maybe many, many times. I've asked some of my guests about the destinations they keep returning to and why they keep going back, which has turned out to be an interesting question. For me, the one I can imagine returning to forever and ever, constantly, is of course Japan. I might have lived there for 2 years. That was not enough. I've been back only twice since. That's, it's 15 years ago that I lived there. So I've only had 2 trips back since. That's definitely not enough. There's so much more I want to see and do there, and so much food to eat, and still so many new foods to try. I just think I will never run out of things I enjoy doing in Japan. So that's one of mine for sure. Another destination I definitely want to go back for my second visit soon is connected to our sponsor. So I have a new sponsor for the next few weeks of the podcast, and it is Hands On Journeys. Now, I have just come back from a trip to Fiji with Hands On Journeys, and there's so much I want to tell you about it, and I will tell you more. We'll have a special episode coming up, which will focus a bit on that trip and Hands On Journeys as well, because it's a truly awesome company. But Fiji is definitely now on my list of places I want to visit again. My son has made me promise that I'll take him again next year, so we'll see. But hopefully I can keep my promise to him. Of course, he wants to go everywhere, but Fiji was amazing, and so much more I want to go back for. So Hands On Journeys is our sponsor for this week and a couple more. They run tours that are all about empowerment tourism, and we'll talk about it in more detail. But let me just summarise to say it's an awesome way to give back and to gain all at once. It was such an amazing trip. I'll leave a link in the show notes to my blog post about the thoughtful travel and empowerment tourism side of going to Fiji. It was just awesome. But do check out more about them at their website, handsonjourneys.com. And you can also use my code Amanda10 to get 10% off any tour that you book with them. But you'll hear more from me about them because they're truly awesome. I'm definitely not just saying that, they really are. Anyway, on to other destinations that are worth visiting twice. And today I was going to say I have Lucas Peters on for the first time, but in fact, all of my guests on today's episode are first-time guests. So I've had a bit of a stint of recording lots of new interviews with lots of different people. It's been so much fun. And so today, there are 3 people you have not heard from before. So it's a bit exciting. And the first of those is Lucas Peters. So he has a bit of a story about a particular love for a place that involves a bit of a love story too.
So it used to be Paris, and then I moved to Paris. So,
so you can't really return there anymore? You live there?
I can't return there anymore because we've been living here for 3 years now. So it's hard to say that, oh yeah, Paris is the one, or I'm always returning to. So in Morocco, there's a town called Asilah that's about an hour south of Tangier. And I had first discovered this town in 2009, and it's someplace that wasn't in a lot of guidebooks, or if it was in there, it was like maybe a paragraph here or there. Not a whole lot in English written about it, but there you can find it quite a bit in like Spanish and French. And I ended up there, and it's got this great little artsy vibe. It's right on the Atlantic coast. It has the old Medina that's in an old Portuguese fortress. So I think the Portuguese fortress was built like in the 1500s. And then after that, of course, the Medina was built inside it. And it's just got a nice feel to it. It's like one of these beach towns with like some little shacks, little tea shacks here and there. That's, when you just find a place and you're like, yeah, I could spend a good chunk of my life here. That's always how I've felt about Asilah. And I think it helps that my wife and I had our first real moment together when we were both still single. We just met. We got put on a project together, and this is 2011, a couple of years later. we're on this project, and we both are in Asilah, and we're meeting for coffee, and I'm so nervous. I'm fiddling with the sugar cubes, and like just trying to not make a total fool out of myself. And I just remember walking with her, and it was just that sense of ease that you have in some places that are new to you, but at the same time they feel old somehow. They're both. They feel familiar and they're strange at the same time. And that was a place I remember thinking, hey, like I'd love to get to know this place a lot better. And at the same time, I was thinking, I'd like to know this girl a lot better too.
Oh, and you did.
So, and I did. I somehow conned her into marrying me. I don't know how that happened, but so it's been a place where I've been going back, and I'll go once or twice a year, and it's a place where I keep on seeing new things coming up. There's it's getting a bit more popular with the English-speaking crowd. So, there's some more Anglophones there, including a Scottish Moroccan by the name of Kareem, who owns this farm-to-table restaurant. It's the only farm-to-table restaurant I know of in Morocco.
Oh, wow.
So he uses his family farm, and they make most of the food that comes into their restaurant, which is called Port 14. And it's just become like one of these places I stop in, I say hi to Kareem, have a pretty nice meal, and then, my wife and I go look, and usually we check out real estate to see, how much money we'd need to actually buy to live here.
I like your thinking.
It's just been one of those places that, you get to know people, so there's a bunch of shop owners. I know a couple of the resident artists, are pretty good friends of mine now. And, we're always, making sure we have dinner with them, and we'll bring Zeph there the next time we go. So everybody will get to meet Zeph for the first time.
Oh, beautiful.
That's our son, so they'll meet our son for the first time. It'll be kind of a really special trip, which was also kind of funny. So in Asilah, there's a little, what do we call the krakia? The krakia is like a viewpoint. I guess there's not a better, I can't think of a better kind of thing for that. So there's this viewpoint that's called the krakia in Asilah. And right below this viewpoint is this old cemetery with these beautiful, like, mosaic covered gravestones and everything.
Oh, beautiful.
And the gate, it's almost always closed. And we were there one time, and the gate just happened to be open. So Mina and I, we walked down, and hey, let's go see what this is. Let's go check it out. And so we're walking through, and we meet the guardian of the cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this old man who's like, he's got some serious cataracts, kind of hazy vision and everything. And, he's happy to meet us, of course. And we talk for a while, and he stops and he kind of looks into the distance, and he says, I have a vision. You guys are going to return here with your son.
Oh.
And I think it's going to be in just a year or so. And we're like, well, we just got married. He's like, yeah, I think you'll be coming back with your son pretty soon.
Oh.
So we can't wait to go back and actually see him and say, hey, look,
you were right.
Son. So you were right. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Oh, well, it sounds like a very special place. But I had to laugh when you say you're looking at real estate, because first of all, you had Paris that you kept returning to, so you just moved there. And so this is the next version of that, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Paris gets too busy and too polluted sometimes. So, honestly, before we moved to Paris, my wife and I, we found a house that we were really about to buy there. We got very, very close to buying a house in Asilah. I had lived in Morocco for 6 years. So we were from 2009 to 2015, I was in Morocco. And so in 2013, 2014, we were really close to buying a house. We'd signed our promise to buy note and everything like that.
Wow.
And at the last minute, the seller backed out of the deal.
Goodness.
So we took that as kind of, that's
fate,
a
sign.
That was a sign. So, and the next year she got the job offer with UNESCO, which is what brought us up to Paris.
Oh, okay, right. But you were also very happy to go to Paris by the sounds of it. So.
Of course. Are you kidding me? Yeah. I told her, So I'm forced to come to Paris and be a writer. Oh, that's
Oh,
gonna
okay.
be awful. Yeah.
If you insist.
Yeah. If you insist. Yeah. Whatever makes you happy,
awesome.
right?
I've still never been to Morocco yet, but I'm sure I will love it. And when I hear tales like what Lucas told about Asilah, I'm just more and more convinced I'll have to spend months in Morocco to experience everything that I want to experience there. Now, my second guest today is Jim Jones, and Jim tells me about two places that he loves returning to, and funnily enough, one of them matches up with something Lucas was saying as well.
We like Las Vegas a lot.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Vegas is not a bad trip for us. It's about a 4-hour flight, which isn't too bad. We're not big gamblers. We're not big drinkers. We're not big partiers. We love food. We love. I think I love food too much because I got about 15 kilograms. I need to maybe consider taking off. But
I understand. I have the same issue.
Yeah, Vegas is such a great food town, and it's all of these new experiences. I mean, the restaurants and the chefs there, you really have to be at the top of your game. Right. And it's not just the taste, but it's the presentation, it's the ambiance, everything. So we just feel like it's super special. The other thing is in the area around Las Vegas, there's a lot to do outside of the city. There's I believe it's a national park. It's called Red Rocks. It's sandstone that's sort of striated, and it's different colors based on where the sedimentation occurred. And there's all kinds of hiking trails and driving trails, so it's gorgeous. Cool. You're 6 hours, maybe 5-6 hours by car from the Grand Canyon, from Joshua Tree National Park, etc. So there's a lot to do if you base yourself in Las Vegas and get out of there.
Yes, it's interesting. I've never been to Las Vegas, but to me, all I know about, the stereotype is it's all casinos, and it sounds horrifying to me. But it must be last year or so, but I spoke with a travel blogger, Diana Edelman, who actually lives in Vegas and runs a website called Vegans Baby. So it's all about the vegan restaurants of Las Vegas. But which is quite a clever name. But she also told me all this stuff about Vegas that I had no idea of, because to me it's just casinos. But I know her, I've met her, and I know she lived in Thailand for some time, and I thought she had the same kind of travel ethos as me, and there she is loving living in Vegas. So she told me sort of similar things to you. So it's funny how a city can have such a reputation and probably attract a lot of people for the casinos and stuff, but there's so much more to it.
Absolutely. And the casinos, that's where the money is. So that's what they advertise. And there's an advertising campaign. I don't know if it's made it out of the U.S., but there's an advertising campaign here. The tagline is "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas."
Yes.
And so they're appealing to they're not appealing to our better angels. In
that's right.
in that slogan, and it works. But for us, we've just found, so much more to experience, outside of the city.
Interesting.
So,
yeah.
And I guess, and going back to your question, I mentioned that there were two places that I would always go back to. The second one is Paris. I studied French when I was in high school, right. And my teacher always used to tell us stories about Paris and about the lifestyle and people and all that, and that always inspired me to want to go. So I got to make my first trip there in '99. It was only for a weekend, but I walked as much as I could. I was staying near the Louvre. I walked as much as I could. I saw as much as I could, and I just completely fell in love. And then my wife and I went back. Actually, in 2007, I think was the trip that we went back there. And then we went for our 20th anniversary, a few years later and all that. But it's such a great food town.
Mm-hmm.
I have found Parisians, maybe this is, because I try to speak the language and follow their cultural customs, but I have found them to be welcoming and inviting and warm. I love the history. I love the architecture. I actually am publishing a post on Monday about taking a day trip out to Versailles, which was just such an amazing trip for the architecture, but also the gardens and all that. So it's such a romantic city. It's one of probably my top city in the world that I would love to visit.
Yes, it's one of those cities that does live up to the hype, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a special place. I've been lucky enough to have been there probably three times. When I was living in Europe, I went a couple of times and I went as a child. And it's funny, like France doesn't draw me in. I don't feel like I'm a real Francophile the way some people always love France. But and I don't even, and most of the times I didn't even feel like I feel drawn to go to Paris. It was just one of those things, my boyfriend wanted to go at the time and there was cheap airfare, so off we went, things like that. But every time I've been there, I've just had such a special trip, and there's so much to see and do there, and so much history and culture and amazing museums and galleries, and there's so much more that I need to discover again. So I will have to go back there.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that you don't feel the draw from France. So I mentioned that, my wife and I went there for our 20th anniversary. That was in 2011. And we spent a few days on our own in Paris, and then we went to kind of the middle part of France and took a riverboat cruise down to the south part. So we went through Bordeaux and Provence and all that. And I'd never had the desire, not desire, but I'd never been really drawn to it as you put it. But we got there and was like, wow, this is just an amazingly, gorgeous region. We went to an olive farm, a small business where they pressed olive oil.
Oh, cool.
You see olive trees that are like 1,000 years old. Like we just don't have that stuff in the States. And
exactly.
I was so impressed with the people, the lifestyle, the food, everything in kind of the southern part of France. So that's definitely something I would go back and do.
I definitely don't need to be convinced to return to Paris. It's a place that's kind of magical for nearly everyone, I think. And although I've been there several times, my son definitely wants to go there someday. And he's even learning French in school, so he might be useful to me. I can't speak any French, so I'm sure we'll get to Paris again one day, shortly enough. But it's funny, Vegas has never been on my list of places to go, but Jim's the second person who has reliably told me the stuff there I will like. So perhaps one day I will try it out as well. Never say never, for sure. Now, my final guest today is Erin Holmes of Explore with Erin. So Erin originally grew up in Perth, not far from me. At the moment, she's living in Melbourne, but it's relevant that she grew up in Perth when you hear where her place that she always returns to happens to be.
I've been to Bali 17 times.
17 times. That is impressive. I guess when you're in WA, it is actually quicker to fly to Bali than to fly to the east coast of Australia. So that might be part of it.
Quicker and cheaper to get to Bali than anywhere else in the world from WA.
It is indeed, yes. Okay, but why do you love it so much?
I hated it the first time I went.
Oh, that's funny because I hated it. I've only been once. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. And I haven't been back since. But yeah.
I went when I was 19. It was 1999. And it was so different. I'd only ever been in Australia, and it was so different from anything I'd ever experienced.
Right.
The humidity and the poorness and the dirtiness. And I was like, I'm never coming back here. But like you said, it's the cheapest and the quickest place to fly to when I was living in Perth. So we used to go quite regularly. And then during our travels, nomadic travels, we actually lived there. There's a massive expat community in Ubud. And it's really a great place to live. It's there's so many people there to connect with, and the food is wholesome, and the massages are cheap, and the nannies are cheap. And, we were living there for $2,000 a month, and we had a full-time chef, a full-time cleaner, a full-time nanny, and a full-time security guard.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That's less than what I pay for my mortgage.
And now I guess I know it so well that it's always when I want to go on vacation to vacate, to just relax. I like the idea of going somewhere I know where I want to eat, I know what activities I'm going to do, and I know where I want to stay. And there's not so much research involved. I know I can just go there and relax because I know what I'm going to do. So
yeah, and you don't feel drawn to go out sightseeing regularly because you know it well, so you can actually relax and chill out.
That's right. I mean, I just took my boyfriend for the first time last year. He'd never been. And I loved playing tour guide with him, like showing him around all my favorite spots and my favorite places to eat. And then we did go to a few places that I had never been as well. And I love that too, because you get that fine line of knowing what you want to do and then still being vaguely surprised at some of the stuff available to do. So
that's a good combination, isn't it? And what did he think for his first visit there?
Well, he loved it.
Okay.
I mean, because I showed him all the best spots, really.
That's true. That's pretty handy, isn't it?
I said to him, "You're lucky. When I came with my family. Like, obviously, none of us had been before, so we didn't know what we were doing."
Yeah. So he had the great first impression.
Yeah. And I had him mostly in Ubud, jungle territory, like seeing rice terraces and eating at my favorite restaurants. So it was a very good experience for him. He loved it.
Oh, that sounds perfect. Oh, dear. That sounds lovely. I'm running a blogging workshop there next year, so I will definitely be back there next year, and I think that'll be a lovely experience. I will learn to love it like many people do.
Yes, you will. It's fabulous. You just got to keep going.
I think Erin has a lot in common with a bunch of Perth people who visit Bali very, very regularly. As we discussed, it is actually cheaper and quicker to fly to Bali than basically anywhere else. Even the next Australian city, Adelaide, is further away from Perth than Bali. So it's a very common destination for people living in WA. And I will be back there next year at the very latest because the lovely Anna Kvachinska, who you've heard from before on the podcast, is running retreats there and is going to get me up there running a blogging workshop. So I will be there, and I think Anna will show me a much more interesting side of it than I experienced on my first trip there. So go Bali. Now, that's it for episode 101 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. A big, big thank you to our sponsor today, Hands On Journeys. You can find out heaps more about their trips at handsonjourneys.com. And don't forget, use the code Amanda10 for 10% off any tour. And I'll also leave a link in the show notes to the blog post I've published this week about my experience in Fiji with Hands On Journeys. It was awesome. I know I keep saying that. I will continue to say that, so sorry in advance. Lucas Peters was my first new guest today, and he's lots of things, but he's also the author and the main photographer of the Moon travel guide for Morocco. He does know his Moroccan stuff, and you can find him at lucasmpeters.com. I'll also leave a link in the show notes to that Port 14 restaurant he mentioned, because I looked it up and it looks really cool and something quite different to experience if you are in Asilah in Morocco. After that, I chatted with Jim Jones. You can find Jim at travelstoriesandimages.com. And similarly, if you just look up on like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, everywhere, stories and images. So stories and images for ways to connect with Jim. And last but very far from least, I chatted with Erin from Explore with Erin. So she is at explorewitherin.com. You may know her from Travel with Bender, but she is now just doing amazing stuff at Explore with Erin, and you can find her on Instagram as well. And if you are a fellow blogger, she runs some course. She's running a course in the Build Blog Freedom course called Working with Brands. So if you're a blogger, you can look that up and connect with Erin there. Of course, my most favourite thing for you to do is to pop across to Facebook and join the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group. It is my little lovely, safe, comfy, wonderful place on the internet where I know that everyone in there thinks similarly to me about travel. So there's a link in the show notes, or just search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook. All of this info and more will be in the show notes. And for this episode, the show notes will be at notaballerina.com/101. I'm still having trouble believing we're into triple figures, but it's really exciting. Thank you very much again for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.